All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our webinar on digital risk protection from our vendor, Skurio. My name is Murali, Vellat, and I'm the division manager from Bulwark Technologies. I head the corporate security division within Bulwark. And I'm pleased to announce this particular webinar. We have Jeremy Hendy, who joins me. He's the CEO of Skurio, who will be actively talking to you about his technologies and where we stand from a digital risk protection strategy. So the agenda for today is we will talk about a quick introduction to Bulwark and who we are. And I will hand over the session to Jeremy, who will then talk to you about the digital risk protection in terms of what DRP is all about and what it entails. He will also run you through the use cases and what is the data that you need to be looking out for. We will also look at what are the cyber threats and how we attack or mitigate those kind of threats, and what kind of DRP strategies you can use to try and avoid such threats. Then, of course, there will be advanced techniques in terms of how you can protect your information. And towards the end, we will have the question and answers. With that, we will just give a quick introduction as to who Bulwark Technologies is all about. So we've been here in this region for the last 21 years. We started in 1999, and we've been a very successful information security value-added distributor for the region. We've actually signed up with some key security vendors to be able to address the security issues and concerns in the region out here. We have over 700 plus business partners in the Middle East and in India as well. We've got offices in India, and we've got teams sitting in Saudi Arabia as well to kind of take the business forward into those regions. Yeah. And we've kind of we've identified that there are a lot of gaps, there are a lot of security loopholes, there are a lot of concerns that the current security vendors that are carrying out there in this region. And we've actually brought in some very key best of breed technology vendors to be able to address that space. Skurio being one of those technology vendors who's addressed the digital risk protection space. I think we all know that with digital transformation, it's no longer perimeter-based security protection. It's become borderless, and there's a lot of data is kind of pervasive. So you need to understand how to mitigate those risks and how do you control that attack surface. Yeah. So therefore, we have a strategic relationship with Skurio to bring in that technology into the market out here and to address that space. We work as an extended arm of the vendor, where we represent the vendor in every possible way, be it marketing efforts, be it security advice, be it consultancy services, or support sort of things as well. The fact that we've got a good dedicated team of sales and marketing and the certified technical team actually helps us to address that particular requirement, both from our partners and our customers alike. With that, I would like to hand over the session over to Jeremy to kind of take it forward and talk about digital risk protection and how Skurio can address that particular space. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Murali. That's a great introduction, and we're really excited to be working with Bulwark in the region to help represent us. So yeah, I'm Jeremy Hendy. I'm the CEO here at Skurio, and I was going to cover in about 40 minutes today just really an overview of digital risk protection and how you can help deploy that within your organization to look at a number of different use cases. So let's start off with why do we need digital risk protection? What is it? And we think there's really three things have changed a lot in the last few years, which I think Murali put it very well, that your data is now borderless. I think a lot of our businesses have undergone quite a significant digital transformation, which is great for our customers because it means they can access our platforms anytime, anywhere, on any device. But it means increasingly people have got very complex digital supply chains where data is being shared and exchanged and processed. Of course, the rise of cloud apps, which is great from a convenience and cost perspective. You don't have to manage all that hardware yourselves or find places to host it. But it does mean that security is not necessarily in your direct control. And the real growth we're seeing in so-called shadow IT. So these are the systems that your staff are using, generally cloud-based, web-based, in some cases free. That really help them do their job. They're all part of that digital transformation process, but you don't necessarily know about them within the security team. And of course, the risks come from, any one of those partners in your supply chain can have a vulnerability and can be a source of leakage of your data. or one of those shadow IT systems can have a leak or get hacked. And if you don't even know that that system's being used by your staff, there's a risk that that data leaks or that some of that information that's been disclosed is a threat to your organization. So I think still a lot of organizations are spending almost all of their time and effort defending what they can control, which is the perimeter, the networks, the machines that they control. And what we're doing with digital risk protection is providing a balance to that by taking a data-centric approach to monitoring for leaks of data and threats that are relevant to you, to give you advanced warning of those targeted threats at your organization, and a real-time detection of any data leaks that happen, no matter where they happen in that supply chain. So if we think about the different systems we have in our organizations, starting at the left-hand side, we've got those core corporate systems that are very well controlled and well managed. But if you think of, the systems your staff use during their day-to-day, they're perhaps logging into cloud apps, they're logging into partner systems. There's those shadow IT where they're using some system for work, but you don't necessarily know about it. And then there's all the third-party sites and non-work related sites they use. So you can kind of broadly categorize those as the systems you know about and the systems you don't know about. But even the ones you know about, you don't necessarily directly control the security. So generally, you could think of those in three categories. There's the managed and controlled systems, where you put most of your effort on the security side. There's the systems you know about but you don't control, where you can at least audit the security. But there's a lot of unknown and unmanaged systems that your staff are using. And the key thing is that each of those sites can introduce risk, and a risk that originates from one of those unknown and unmanaged systems can significantly increase the probability of one of your core systems being compromised. So if we think about that kind of, as you get further away from the perimeter, you can start to think of it a bit as a pyramid of risk. You've got more and more systems being used. Typical enterprises, there's lots of surveys from the cloud application security people saying that, if you include shadow IT, there are hundreds or thousands of systems that are being used. And of course, it's worse than that, because every one of your partners has their own pyramid of risk. So, really, you're dealing with thousands of potential weak points in your data supply chain. So it becomes almost impossible to prevent a breach happening. So what we're doing with the digital risk protection platform, what is DRP? So a DRP platform is something that is detecting data on the outside of your organization, and really there's four main things it does: is detect that threat or that data, alert you in real time, help you take action against it, and hopefully address the root cause of the issue. Data leaks out and threats happen because of two main reasons. There's the malicious attack, of course, the hackers and the hacktivists or malicious insiders, but 90% of the breaches reported in UK certainly are through simple human error. They're sending an email to the wrong person. They are accidentally leaving a cloud storage bucket unprotected. And we need to find solutions that can cover your data wherever it's stored and processed. So not just inside your network, but that data in your supply chain that you know about, or in the shadow IT systems that are outside your network. And then the main thing I want to talk about today is the types of data that we're looking to protect with a digital risk protection platform. And so we've kind of categorized those into four main sections. So we're going to talk about each of those. And the way a DRP platform works is we're taking each of those core categories of data that we're interested in protecting, and we come up with a set of search terms that we can use to represent and discover that data. So if it's your login credentials that you're looking for, compromised login credentials, you can use search terms that are as simple as the corporate email domain, or they could be a list of 1 million customer email credentials. If it's your assets and infrastructure you're wanting to protect, you're going to be interested in monitoring for things like your IP addresses or your server names being listed, and so on. So for each of those use cases, it's about constructing a set of search terms, putting them into the DRP platform. And what the DRP platform is doing is continuously and automatically monitoring the surface, deep, and dark web, looking for any information that matches any of those targeted threat search terms and alerting you in real time if it finds something, and optionally through an API connecting into a system that can help you deal with that, such as raising a ticket or launching an investigation or doing some further filtering. So we're going to look at each of those use cases in a little bit more detail and talk about the kind of threats we see. So we'll start with the most common one, the login credentials. Somebody said the other day to me, hackers don't break in anymore, they log in, and there's a statistic, I think from Verizon, saying 80% of the breaches that they saw in 2020 were as a result of compromised login credentials. So really important, fairly simple use case, but really important. And this is a real example of a post that we saw dumped on a bin site, on the paste site. We've changed the data so because it's a webinar, but this was a genuine case where this data, a set of email addresses and passwords, was posted on a bin site, and it triggered an automated alert on our platform because we were monitoring a customer domain, and the post contained an email address from one of our customers and a plain text password, which was in this example, we've changed it. It's Liverpool. In the real one, it was a different football team, but it was probably that employee's favorite football team. They've used it as their password, like they use the same password all over the place. And so that's now a risk because that presents a risk to the organization or through business email compromise. If I can get into that employee's email account, corporate email account, using the same password or a variant of it, then I can cause all sorts of damage. I can maybe get into the network or one of those shadow IT systems, but also that data can be used for spear phishing and blackmail. We've seen email campaigns like sort of sextortion type of email campaigns where they will include a genuine password for your account in the email to give it more credibility. So what you can do about it, once you understand the risks, is mitigate the impact of that leak. So in some cases, we can get the post taken down very quickly to minimize the number of people that can see it. But you can do some simple things like force a password reset if that employee's, for example, working in a sensitive department like finance. You might want to, or it's an IT privileged admin user, you could just potentially automatically force a password change. We think it's really important to inform each of those end users that their data is leaking out there as part of the education. So you can automatically send an email to that employee, maybe including a redacted version of the password, and suggest they reset any third-party sites where they've used that password. And then finally, it comes back to education, educating those employees that they need to be now very suspicious, very careful about phishing, making sure they're using good password hygiene, using strong passwords on each site. Making sure they're using a password manager if they're accessing third-party sites. So at least if a password is exposed, it's only used in one site. And if we take another look at how hackers would use that information, that leaked information, to get into your systems. So if we imagine this employee, James Bond, he's logs into your site using a strong password. It's got a mixture of uppercase and lowercase and numbers and symbols. But if he's used that same password on unrelated sites and one of those sites gets hacked, often what the hacker will do is sell or leak those databases of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of emails and passwords. And then someone else will get hold of that data. And there's a couple of ways that they can exploit that. One is using automated credential stuffing. There are plenty of scripts and tools available online, even with tutorials on YouTube that show you how to load up these username and password scripts and use them to try and get into all sorts of different sites, PayPal, Amazon, banks, whatever. So it may be that you get hit by an automated attack on one of your systems, but also if somebody is wanting to target your organization specifically, they can take that username, they can look at the password, they can try different variants of it, be very subtle about how they try and get into that system, and can maybe get in through a highly targeted manual attack. One of the biggest risks is business email compromise, of course. If the employees used a similar password or a derivative password on their email account, once you're into someone's email account, then you can do lots of things. You can do password reset requests. You can set up forwarding rules so that the user of the email account doesn't even see any of that malicious traffic. And of course, two-factor authentication is a big help here, but it's not invincible. There's things like smishing links. There's SIM swap fraud, where people can intercept your phone number through social engineering. And again, if they can intercept that two-factor authentication and bypass the system, then they can potentially get into your site and application. So, you know, it all starts with a username and password. Certainly, we'd encourage using multi-factor authentication wherever you possibly can. But the key thing is educating your users to use a strong and unique password on every single website. And you know, here's a real example. Again, we've changed the name and the details, but this was a real example of a fund manager in the City of London who runs an investment fund, and he'd use his work email address and the same password on multiple sites, and it was the names of his kids. So here it was Lucy, Tom, and Charlie. One of those sites he'd logged into had got hacked, and those credentials ended up in one of those combo dump lists of hundreds of millions of emails. And a second hacker has discovered the same password works on Netflix. So what he's done is tried the automated login to Netflix, harvested a set of credentials that work for Netflix accounts, and he's sold them. And he's delivered the data to the buyer on an anonymous dump site, which is where we've discovered it. So as soon as that data has been posted online, we're generating an alert, can inform, in this case, Green Circle Capital, that their fund manager's email address and password's been exposed. So that's credentials, really simple. Let's move on to a few other examples about your core IT assets and infrastructure. So your servers, your sites, your domains. So here's an example on the right of a reconnaissance script that's been posted by a hacker group. And obviously some of these hacktivist groups, this example is anonymous, it's the anonymous group. They often will target an industry or a region. They're motivated ideologically. They're not necessarily looking for financial gain. And in this case, what's happened is they've run an automated penetration test on a lot of different organizations to identify weaknesses in the infrastructure. And they're then publishing those results on a hacker forum or a bin site to encourage hacking or DDoS attacks by their followers. So what we've done is we've detected that email address being posted online, but we can see in the rest of this post they've been automatically detecting that there are missing X-frame options on the website, which means that the whole website may be vulnerable to being spoofed and clickjacked. They've detected there is no web application firewall there, and they're going on to probe thousands and thousands of different weaknesses in the infrastructure. And then in this case, they're posting it online. This particular operation is targeting organizations in Chile. This is a hospital in Chile that they're targeting because it's related to the Chilean police force. And so now that we've seen this this being posted in real time, we've got early warning that an operation is being planned against this organization, which lets us deploy countermeasures ahead of an attack. So, for example, deploying a web application firewall to avoid a DDoS attack. And we've done this very successfully with a lot of our customers. Where they're getting targeted by organizations is you can get some early warning hours or days ahead of an attack, that an attack is being planned, and then you can analyze the information that the bad people have and use that to plan your defenses. Another example is typo squatting. We're seeing a huge amount of this at the moment. So this is people registering fraudulent domains. This example is for a brand called Grinley's, which is it's not an active bank anymore. It's a former brand of that was an old London bank that was acquired by Australia, New Zealand, ANZ, and then transferred to Standard Chartered. And what we've seen over the last few weeks is a gang that's been registering multiple fake domain versions. They're putting up websites, trying to phish people. And so we've seen different variants of these domains being registered. lots and lots. I mean, dozens, including a set in Pakistan where they've kind of recognised the fact it's part of standard chartered, so they're registering lots of different versions of this domain name, including some with typo errors in, and they've we'll see sometimes the domains will be registered and then parked until they're used. So often it can be weeks or months before there's actual website content or a mail server established. Sometimes the hackers aren't that smart and they'll just leave, in this case, the root of their server being exposed online, so you can get a little bit more information there about what servers they're using. Try and see what's happening. But this example, the grindleysprivatebanking.com website you see up there, they've taken, in this case, the gang has taken content from a completely unrelated company called Saunderson House, and they've cloned their website. So they've taken the same text from the website and they've copied it across the same navigation structure, and they've just copied the text across because, you know, these people are pretty lazy. And in fact, what they've done is, you can see this little logo menu here. They've copied the same graphics across, the same flip art, but they've actually put a typo in. They've called it cash flow planing instead of cash flow planning. And what's interesting is you can then use these words, these particular expressions as search terms to discover other sites that are being set up by the same gang. So fairly, you know, just that initial detection on the typo squatting domain registration means you can keep an eye on what these gangs are doing, and if they're looking to infringe your brand, then you can trigger site takedowns to try and stay one step ahead of them. So the way it works in a DRP platform is you're setting up an alert monitor for your key brand word, and then the DRP platform is doing a fuzzy match against any new domain registrations that contain a variant of that phrase, alerts you in real time that we've detected a new registration, that then lets you investigate and act. So one of the things you immediately want to do is investigate the site to see if it's a genuine company or if it's a potential threat through phishing or malware. So triage, often those sites will get registered and then parked for weeks or months. So often you'll need to monitor them for any changes to the website content, or perhaps addition of a mail server that could be used for phishing, or DNS changes if a new website's been taken up. And at the point at which you decide it's a threat and you've got a legitimate reason to get the site taken down, we can then do a takedown of that website through the registrar or the hosting company. But once that's been done, it's not finished. As we could see from that Grindley's example, they're continuing to register, you know, tens or dozens of different variants of the website that will then keep popping up. So for Grindley's as an example, in the platform, you would just set up the word Grindley as a search term. When we see something being registered, you'll get a notification through. You can see the different sites that have been registered that day, see more detail about what registrar they've used, do some assessment, and then one of the things we can do through our platform is you can request a takedown of that fraudulent site. So that was your core assets and infrastructure, people targeting your organization. Let's take a look at, you know, the most important category of data breaches, which is customer data. So data about people, whether it's your customers or your staff. And, you know, we talked earlier about that digital transformation. If you think about your own organizations, how you go about getting customers processing their data through the journey to deliver your service or product, typical organizations are sharing customer data with dozens, tens, even hundreds, in some cases thousands of different systems. So one of our UK customers in the travel business stores and processes customer data in about 1,000 different systems. So it's really hard to guarantee there's going to be no breaches from any of those. And also, a lot of organizations will outsource functions like customer support or shipping or finance processing. So that customer data is being passed to third parties where you have no direct control over what's happening to that information. And if we go back to that initial example we looked at earlier on with Marcus's email address and password being leaked out, if we're going to take a look at that example, which again is a real example, to try and find out where did it come from and how did it leak out. But a really interesting question is, how would you know if this is your customer data? How would you know if all of these people were also your customers? So that original data set we saw there had 2,136 email addresses in 460 different email domains, because there's lots of individual companies, individual ISPs in there. But one of the things we noticed straight away in that, even in that set of 10 or 12 that we could see in the snippet in our platform, was the same password being used twice, which is a very unusual password. Again, we've changed the name here. It was the name of a coffee-related company, a bit like Nespresso. It wasn't Nespresso, but one of those kind of things. But we took those 2,136 email addresses that were in that post and looked at the passwords of them, and we saw that 10% of the passwords were relating to coffee, and very specifically to this string Maxpod coffee. So we thought, okay, that's very weird. And a very quick bit of analyst research finds that this is a US coffee pod system, and there's only one importer in the UK of that system, and it was very easy to identify that data had originated from that company, because in fact that company's name was also included in several people's passwords, and some of the email addresses too. And their e-commerce site was a fairly standard e-commerce site that had been built using one of the mainstream platforms. And what we could see from that customer data were a few other interesting attributes. So we saw duplicate usernames and passwords being included in the data set, which suggests it hadn't come from the core database of the website itself, because you really wouldn't have duplicate entries in a user database. We also saw typos in domain names. We saw different email domains being used with the same password. We saw typos in the password. So this strongly suggested to us that the data was being skimmed off through the login form of the website itself. And a very common exploit around is something called Magikart. This was the same technique that was used in a more sophisticated way as part of the British Airways breach in 2018. And the way it works is frighteningly simple. So if you think of most modern JavaScript websites, the way they work is you've got some HTML and PHP on the website, of course, but most of the work is being done by JavaScript libraries, and a typical interactive form where I'm filling in my contact details, my passport number, my credit card details, and I click a button which says Pay Now, and there's a JavaScript that is an event listener in my browser, which is waiting for me to press the button. It then takes all my data, encrypts it, and sends it in a secure way to British Airways to make my booking, which is great. But what happens with Magikart is, if the bad guys can find a way to compromise some library on your website or on a system that's linked to your website, and in this case, in the British Airways case, it was on a different page relating to baggage allowances, and there were 22 lines of JavaScript that had been put into a third-party library and obfuscated. And what that JavaScript was doing was adding a second listener on a second page that was also waiting for you to press that button, and was then encrypting the data and sending it to the hacker's server. And in that case, the hacker had registered a typo-squatted domain. So they'd registered baways.com a few weeks earlier, and they'd given it a security certificate. So it looked at an initial glance quite genuine, even if British Airways had inspected the code. And the key thing here is that data was being sent out by my browser. If I'm booking a ticket, the malicious traffic isn't going through the British Airways network at all. It's going directly from my web browser out to the hacker server. So, there's none of that malicious traffic is going through British Airways network perimeter at all. But what I'm doing is capturing all of those personal details. So going back to that third question I asked is, so there's lots of ways data can leak out. How would you find out if that's your customer data? We've got a longer session which you can listen to as a second webinar about customer data monitoring. But really, there's 5 different techniques that we would recommend to monitor for breaches of customer data. So some fairly simple ones, looking at your company brand names, identifiers in your databases. But then there's a couple of other techniques, so watermarking and fingerprinting, that you can use as well. So I'll quickly cover those. So brands and company names, starting there. Often hackers will use that name of your organization if they're marketing or selling the data, because you know the dark web is just like every other part of the internet. People need to advertise their products. They need to give away free samples. They need to do marketing. So you can often use that as a detection term to see, is somebody talking about your organization on a hacker forum. And those are all forums that are covered by the DRP platform. So the brand name can be a really useful start point for monitoring for leaks of that data. You also need to think about, are people going to include different variants of your company name? They might include typos in it. So that kind of monitoring can generate some false positives. So it's really important that when you're processing that data, you've got the ability to quickly filter through it and discover the real threats from the false positives. And often, you know, these are criminals at the end of the day. A lot of the posts that are out there may not be genuine. They may be old data. They may be harvested through credential stuffing. So you really need to understand the credibility and reliability of the merchant. So this example is, you know, on a hacker forum, the person offering this, as they've only posted 30 messages in the last 10 years. So maybe they're not very reliable or credible as a merchant. Some of the other places now that we see company names being mentioned is on the ransomware site. So Clop is a ransomware group that is exfiltrating data, publishing it online. And here what they're doing is, in this example for Bombardier, the Canadian aerospace company that had a ransomware attack, they've exfiltrated data. They're putting samples of it online. You can see schematics of you know what's happening in the aircraft cockpit and example invoices that they've exfiltrated. So a lot of these groups are now aggressively marketing people's data, and by monitoring the company name, you can use that as a way to discover that in real time as soon as that data is posted online. Another technique is to look for things that are specific to your data set, that are maybe database names, table names, server names, IP addresses, and sometimes that will get included in a data leak. So if you see database dumps or exposed source code, that will often include those variable names. The good thing about those search terms is there's no personally identifiable information. So they can be fairly compact search term sets, fairly easy to set up. This example here, we're monitoring a database name and a table name, and we see here a MySQL dump that's appeared on GitHub. That's here. I've got a hit straight away against the database table name, Shreya123. We also see hits against this table leaves of staff, where I've now got this is a database relating to teachers, I think, in India, and it's you know, I've got a list of names of staff that have appeared in this database dump. So those names of tables and columns can be really helpful indicators of your customer data. Another way is patterns. If you've got account numbers or customer IDs where you can express them as a pattern, then you can monitor effectively a regex that describes the pattern of that data. So again, a small number of search terms that can hopefully find, you know, leaks of customer data if that account number format is included in it. And so you'd get an alert within our platform, which then takes you back to the original dump site where you can see that data being posted. Watermarking, another approach. So these are, we have something called breach markers in our platform that are synthetic identities you can put into your data set. This can be really easy. You can just register them on your own website as if they were a customer. The key thing with breach markers is they are unique. So you would just create an email address and use it for that one entry, so you can detect breach and misuse. The good thing is, because they're not real people, you don't have any false positives. It can be very quick to deploy. and because they're not real people, actually data protection rules don't apply. So you can, if you see that data being misused, you can take your time to investigate the security incident itself. So here's an example of a breach marker. We've made this person up, Jonathan Carter. We've given him an email address, and when we create that email address in the system, we also monitor for incoming emails to that inbox. But if I've signed him up to the Skurio system, I don't want to get alerted on all of the genuine email addresses that I send him. So what I do in our breach marker system is I basically set up a filter and say I don't want to be alerted on real email traffic from me, because that's fine. But if somebody gets hold of that data, leaves the company, go and joins a competitor, and then starts sending emails, I want to get an alert coming through. And similarly, if that email inbox starts getting spam email, then I want to get alerted, because it means my database is being misused. And of course, if that email address ever finds its way on the outside, I know again that my data has been compromised. So watermarking, quite a simple technique that can be really helpful to avoid any false positives when you're looking for leaks of customer data. And then we're just going to quickly take a look at the sort of fingerprinting and anonymized monitoring. So, ideally, if you've got 1 million or 100 million customers and you're wanting to see if this data leak is part of them, every time we see a post that looks like it could be customer data, we want to be comparing it against those, all of your customer records, to see, are all of those people also your customers? And that's quite a difficult problem to solve, because you need to do it at scale. Some organizations, you might have tens of millions of records. It needs to be very secure, so you don't want to add to the risk of a data breach. And for many systems, it's got to be automated. You're going to want to do this through API connectivity. So the way we implement this in the Skurio platform is through a customer data monitoring technique, where we're taking a fingerprint of your customer data sets through the form of a salted hash. And there's a secure API, which is write only, and the only things you upload to our system are those fingerprints, the anonymized data itself. So then that can either be the full length hash, which is fully secure and gives you a one-to-one match between each of those records and your customer records. But also there's an option to use a partial hash, which completely anonymizes it. And as an example of that, if we take a look, this is a real example. So this is our own Salesforce CRM data set of 22,000 records. When we ran that fingerprinting technique, we saw that actually 30% of all of our customers had been involved in some form of breach over the last 8 years. But there were a lot of false positives if you just took the raw data, because a lot of those people's email addresses were also included in a completely unrelated breach. But the good thing is it's very easy to filter that data out. So if you think of that example of a 2,000 email address breach, if only one of those people is also your customer, you don't care about it. So you can do some very easy filtering based on, in this case, more than 3 email addresses in every breach also being part of our CRM data, and also our data representing more than 5% of the breach data. And as simple as that, we got it down to 9 documents over 8 years, including 8 email addresses. So this is really interesting. This was kind of, okay, how come we've got 9 dumps that have been made of data where almost all of it, because here we're looking at a scatter chart saying in this case, 90% of the data in the breach was also in our CRM system. What was going on there? And in fact, we saw that there were this data had been posted online by us, because there are 8 breach markers in our CRM system who've got these synthetic email addresses that we've been using for testing from 2017 through to 2019. And so, in fact, what we saw through this simple filtering was it was very easy to identify those posts as being potentially leaks of our data, except in this case, it was us doing our own tests. So, implementing that kind of customer data monitoring is relatively straightforward. So the key thing is what you're doing is within your trusted environment, whether that's on-premise or cloud, you're taking your customer data sets, you're encrypting it and anonymizing it. And that can be done as easily as through a spreadsheet or a shell script if you're doing it by hand, or it can be a REST API integration. You can create those fingerprints that are anonymized, upload them to the platform. When we're finding data that matches, whether it's the genuine data or false positives, pushing that back into your trusted environment where you can compare it with the original, filter it out, threshold it, and generate alerts. So relatively straightforward, bit of integration work can provide you complete protection over that leaks of that personal data. So just wrapping up on the final category of DRP, having looked at the customer data, a couple of examples of business critical information. So this will be different depending on your business, but a couple of examples. So counterfeit products being marketed and sold on dark web marketplaces. So this could be a counterfeit, a fake good, or it could be a grey market that's leaking out through your supply chain. It could be coming out from an insider. In any case, you may want to investigate that and see if it's a threat that is either a threat to your business reputation or an insider fraud. So monitoring for brand names, product names can be a good way to do this. Another example of commercially sensitive data being leaked is this post, which was a leak from a law firm, which included personal information, legally sensitive information about a live lawsuit. By detecting this in real time, you can mitigate the damage. So one of the things you can do through the DRP platform is immediately request a takedown so that data is no longer in the public domain. But through analyzing the network logs, you can maybe find out, was that data leaked from inside the law firm's corporate network? If it was posted from an external site, you can make a legal request into the dump site to see if you can extract IP addresses and find the leak of the information. So, although the DRP platform is primarily providing the detection, it can also help you take action to minimize the damage and investigate the incident. So just wrapping up, we've seen those examples of those 4 kinds of data. We kind of considered at the beginning the fact that your data is increasingly stored outside the perimeter and can get out either through malicious insiders or external attackers, but usually through simple human error. And what we're doing with the DRP platform is providing those eyes and ears outside the perimeter to detect that information in real time, alert you that it's been posted, help you quickly take action to mitigate the incident and address the root cause so it doesn't happen again. So digital transformation, as it's great for our customers, but it's driven a big change in business risk because your data is places you don't control it. Defending the perimeter by itself is no longer enough. What we're doing with automated DRP is we're helping you reduce that risk through detecting those threats in real time to minimize the impact on your revenues, your internal resources, and your company reputation. So thanks for that, Murali. That's the end of my presentation today. Be really happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Jeremy, for that very informative and insightful session into the digital risk protection. I see there are a couple of questions that have been posted in there. Let me just get hold of that and read it out for you. So the first question is, are there any specific skills you need to have in order to use the Skurio platform?
No, not really. I think it's one of the things that we always try to do with the platform is make it really easy to use and intuitive. So you can sort of think of it as Google for the dark web in some ways. We try to make it very affordable and easy to use. So it's accessible for organizations that don't have huge numbers of highly skilled security experts in-house. So a lot of our customers are small organizations that have maybe some full-time security staff, but they don't have threat intelligence analysts, for example. So no, if you can use Google, you can use our platform for sure. And we also have the Ask an Analyst button in there, so that if you ever get stuck, there's always a Skurio analyst on hand to help you out.
Thanks, Jeremy. The next question is, can Skurio search effectively in foreign languages, say, for instance, Arabic?
Yep, sure, absolutely. Although the user interface of our platform's in English, you can search in any language or script you like. So we support full UTF character searches through the keyword facilities. So yes, if you can type it, we can search in it.
Okay, thanks. And there's another question. Do you need an analyst team in-house to manage the platform? They want to use dark web monitoring, but they don't have the resources in-house to do it. So how can Skurio help with this, and what are their options that you can suggest?
Yeah, good question. I think there's several options here. I mean, one is, as I said before, you don't really need to be an expert to use this. So some of our customers will just set it up and use it themselves without a lot of expertise in-house, and use the Ask an Analyst facility to get in touch directly with Skurio. Another really good option can be to use a managed service provider, MSSP partner, to run this for you. It really depends on the size of your organization, how much you're getting targeted. Is there a lot of information out there about you on the dark web? But a lot of our customers don't have in-house threat intelligence analysts.
Thanks. The next question is, how large is your historic database? And that, from what point can you search data posts? Like if they're more than 3 years old, is that something that you can do?
Yep. So I think our overall index at the moment is coming up to 2.5 billion posts that we've got going back. In the cases of data breaches, we've got about 11 billion, 12 billion credentials that go all the way back to 2010, I think, is the earliest breach. For the searchable dark web content, we're going back to 2016. So in some cases, sort of 4 or 5 years. But yeah, I think it's about 2.5 billion posts we have in the index at the moment. And what we do is we store that for several years, because often you're only detecting a breach, particularly if it's from a third party, maybe 2 years after the event. So it's really important to be able to go back in time. If you've had an incident, you've just discovered a vulnerability, to see, has that data leaked out any time in the past? And a lot of that information quickly gets taken down. We've seen a lot of dark websites getting taken down by law enforcement or by hackers themselves, taking down their competitors' websites. So having access to that historical data, even if it's no longer available on the original site, can be really helpful. And we've got a cache of that data, including the timestamps on when we gathered it.
Okay. And the other question is that, can the Skurio platform take any actions?
Yes. So I think I briefly showed you in the typo squatting example, we've got a couple of actions that are built into the platform, which are the Ask an Analyst, where you can ask one of our own analyst team for help. You can request a takedown of a post or a fraudulent site through the platform. And we also have the ability to collaborate both within your own teams and also with our analysts through triaging posts. So you can add comments to it and annotate it and export that data as a report to help you take action on it. So it's not just about the detection, it's about helping you take action to understand, what does this threat mean to me? What can I do about it? Is there a vulnerability I need to fix? Is there external action I need to take?
The other question that I have now is, how is your solution sized, or how do you structure your solution?
A really good question. We've got a few different feature sets depending on how advanced your users are, and also how high profile your organization is. And then we generally package it based on the size, which is a combination of the number of users and the number of search terms. And it's all the way from very small packages that are affordable to medium-sized organizations with only maybe 100 staff, all the way up to large enterprise where you might have 10 logins in the security team and a very large number of search terms. So it scales in both in terms of the pricing and the capabilities, really along with the size of your organization. And our mission is to make this capability available to organizations of all sizes and capabilities, and especially through managed service providers. Even if you're a really small company, but you're concerned about what risks are out there that you need to be able to deal with, we can protect you.
And how long does it take typically in terms of to take down a website?
Good question, and it depends is the answer. Of course, it depends where it's hosted and who the domain registrar is. So with all these things, it's impossible to give a guarantee, but often it's within 24 hours. We currently have about an 80% success rate in terms of getting complete websites taken down by our analyst team. And usually, if it's one of the mainstream registrars and hosting companies, that can be very quick. It's really about presenting the right evidence to those people on the frontline support team to say, here is some evidence that this is a fraudulent website, it's infringing my copyright, or it's got malicious content on it. And if you make that case well and give them everything they need to action that request, it'll often get taken down in a few hours.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any tools to provide a health check? Like they want to know if there's any information out there as first step, and how can you help with that?
Yeah, sure. We got some. We can run some very simple footprint checks for you that are automated, or again through either directly or through one of our managed service provider partners. You can get effectively a historical health check, some analyst services to review what's out there and determine, okay, here's some information to help you remediate those things that are already out there, and also decide what kind of automated monitoring you want to do to discover new threats.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank Jeremy for that very informative session that you provided on digital risk protection in terms of the tips and insights into what the data is all about in terms of lying outside of your perimeter and how you need to act upon it and manage that and rather mitigate those risks. And I would also like to thank everyone who joined us in this session. We hope you found it useful, and we really look forward to further engagements with you in your role to address the data that is risks to you or to your customer. And we look forward to your engagements going forward. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today.